Hi, everybody. Today's Tuesday, July 15th, 2025, and our friend Carl Wilkerson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Good to be back with you, Nima. Long time no see.
Such a long time, exactly. We missed you here, by the
Yeah.
way, live.
I miss me too. You should have seen me in those rivers. I just can't do it anymore. I fell over about 3 or 4 times. Almost got washed down the river one time. My friend lost my 82-year-old friend fishing with me lost his rod, and it came down the river to me. We are a joke.
You were fishing his rod.
Yeah. It didn't. When I picked it up, I said, "It doesn't have a fish on it. I don't want it."
Larry, I want to start with what has happened, the latest news on the case of Ukraine. Donald Trump somehow issued an ultimatum. I don't know, we can call it ultimatum or something, a new sort of
Certainly
dead,
sounds like it.
dead for Putin and Moscow. And here is what he said in the aftermath of that deadline that he put on Russia.
Is very long, and it could be sooner than that. I don't think 50 days is very long. You should have asked that same question to Biden. Why did he get us into this war? You should ask that question. Yeah, and what did he tell you? Why did he get us into this war? You know why he got us in? Because he's a dummy. That's why. And you don't cover it right. But you should be asking that question to Biden. Why did he get us into this war? Because he's incompetent.
So, what's the point here to attack Joe Biden over and over when you're the president of the United States? You're in charge.
Well, my first reaction would be, why have you not fulfilled your promise to your MAGA horde? You aren't out of the war. It's your war now. So why are you doing this? But I know why he's doing it. Nima, in the last 72 hours, 96 hours, MAGA has begun to sunder. It's begun to split right down its heart. Part of this is one of Trump's confidants and good friends, and I talk to him every day guy, Tucker Carlson, has devastated him. First, with the expose on the Epstein affair. Second, with his more or less takedown of Senator Cruz. Third, with his open air celebration almost of the fact that MAGA is splintering, and then his interview with the president of Iran. He has caused Trump's base, his fundamental base, to split. And one of the issues they're splitting over, of course, increasingly, it's been that way slowly but surely over Gaza. But it's now really that way over Ukraine and over his failure to deliver his promises. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene, I almost fell off my seat this morning when I watched the video of her talking about these issues and talking about Donald Trump and about what he has not done that he promised he would do in very strident terms. He's losing people other than morons and imbeciles like Lindsey Graham. He's losing people. He's losing his base, and he's only a few months into the first year of his second administration. So that's the first reason. He is searching desperately for words, for statements, for actions that will restore at least a modicum of the solid nature of his base. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is along with this, we are in a very different situation right now. And I am not at all sure that Trump understands this, nor, more importantly, am I sure, I know his cabinet doesn't, none of the principals do, but I'm not sure the billionaires behind him understand this other than in a very negative way. And I'll take a few minutes and just explain what I mean by that. First of all, we are in World War III. We are already engaged in World War III. I recommended to some people this morning to pick up a copy of a treatise, which is absolutely beautiful in its prose and the turn of the century, 19th to 20th century way, John Maynard Keynes writes. It's just beautiful to read him, but it's not beautiful to contemplate what he's saying. The book is a small pamphlet published after the Versailles Treaty was molded, such as it was, and it's called The Economic Consequences of the Peace. Now, John Maynard Keynes was the principal economic guru there at the conference with responsibility for reporting on it and dealing with the economic dimensions of the peace. If you look at that and you look at, and of course, JMK had no idea that he was predicting the future. But if you look at what he describes in there as the reasons for why Britain and France wanted 1914 to happen, wanted the war to happen, bred the war in many respects, it was because Germany was becoming not only the dominant economic, technocratic, you name it, power, it was overwhelming both France and Britain in terms of their population and in terms of the imperial reach that especially Britain, but France also enjoyed at that time. In other words, as he points out in this treatise, both countries, France and Britain, wanted to restore their empires as swiftly as possible, buttress them, shore them up. Germany was the biggest threat, and they figured war was the best solution. So forget the Archduke Ferdinand and all the rest, the automaticity of the mobilization tables and such. Both wanted war. Then he goes into the economic consequences of the peace, and he demonstrates conclusively that it didn't work. It didn't work. In fact, it probably set both empires back, especially economically. They owed the United States their lives. They owed everything they owned to the United States as the main banker of their efforts. So 20 years later, and they designed the peace to do this, and this is the man to tell you that, they designed the peace to do this. Lloyd George, Clemenceau, Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson is defined, I think, very, very well as the most incompetent person who ever entered the room. He simply lost to Lord George and Clemenceau, basically. So they built the second war, and they took their countries into the second war in order to restore their empires. Winston Churchill, most formidably of all, and they destroyed those empires. France and Britain destroyed their empires. Now they're clinging to the skirts of America. Well, my point here is that's precisely what we're doing right now, with China replacing Germany vis-a-vis us, and us replacing Britain and France vis-a-vis those two. And we're in World War III. The battles, the initial skirmishes and battles, they aren't skirmishes in Ukraine, they're pretty serious, and in Southwest Asia, they're pretty serious, are being fought right now. Along the central line, there are clandestine operations going on in the Baltic and the Arctic. There are fomentings of war in Southwest Asia. Don't think for a moment that we're through with that. Bibi will take us into war with Iran. Ultimately, we're going to war with Iran. If you listen to Tucker's interview with the president of Iran this morning, or I listened to it this morning, I think it was done a day or two ago. You just feel for the Iranian president because he still doesn't get it. I mean, if we take him at face value now, he could be dissembling now. I would be if I were he. But if he's really speaking what he thinks and what the Ayatollah thinks and has blessed him to say, he's still fooled. He still thinks he can work with the United States. If I were he right now, I'd build a nuclear weapon so fast it would make Kim Jong-un's head spin. I'd build a nuclear weapon and I'd say, there, fait accompli, go away, Israel. That's where we're headed. We're headed to another battle in this arc of crisis I've described before, but we're in World War III. This is World War III. Trump hasn't a clue. He hasn't a clue, nor does anyone in his cabinet, except to pursue this war as far as is necessary to restore the American empire. And that's a very dangerous situation because why? It isn't like 1914. It isn't like 1939. We have nuclear weapons.
Larry, what does Europe want from the United States? They're asking for more weapons, but can they get it?
They can get weapons, but they can't get what they need, and they can't get weapons that they're talking about, like PAC-3 Patriots and so forth, in anywhere near the quantities that they would need. And I'm not sure they would do any good anyway, Nima, except to afford more target material for Russians. It's not going to do them any good. And what we're doing is bleeding not only our stocks down to where it's probably incomprehensible what we're doing to ourselves, but we're also bleeding Europe's stocks down. We're now talking about using the intelligence agencies to shift MI6, CIA, and Mossad principally to shift weapons around within the European tapestry. And that's absurd. I know people like Mark Rutte, who have the brain of a warthog, are okay with it. But I mean, Rutte's showing me that he's worse than Stoltenberg. He has no comprehension of what he's doing, no comprehension of where he's leading the alliance and where ultimately it's going to wind up. Because we're talking about, as I said, engaging in World War III, and they're going to lose. But everyone's going to lose, because when the American empire realizes it's losing badly, catastrophically, it will use nuclear weapons.
Why does Germany want long-term missiles, long-range missiles? And just is that they're talking about 2,000 kilometers, the range of these missiles, and how is that going to? Are they going to use it against Russia? And what would be the reaction from Russia? Does Donald Trump and his administration thinking of these things that are happening? Because after all, you can say that Germany is buying these things, but if they would be used against Russia, if they use it against Russia, what would be the reaction? What is the outcome? How can not? How can the administration not understand the consequences of what they're doing right now?
Because Trump is an idiot. I mean, that's a simple answer. But I think we're looking at a situation here where the coincidence of timing might not be completely opportune, but I think Merz is, as I've said before, very short numbered in his days as chancellor. I think he's already lost the support of the majority of the German people. And once they viscerally understand what he's doing, it'll be like Pershing II deployments by Ronald Reagan in his administration, when we disturbed Europe so badly we almost lost it. We almost sundered NATO with that. The INF Treaty, of course, was a result of that. When we decided that was enough, we go ahead and do with the Russians, the Soviets at the time, the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty. That's what brought that about, really. But the brouhaha in Europe over deployment of Pershing IIs was not unlike the brouhaha is going to be over this, especially if one of them is used and Germany's trademark is on it. Merz is gone. Overnight, he'll be gone. So we're looking at a political situation that could give us a partial solution in terms of Germany. But even if it doesn't, Neiman, this isn't going to change anything except make Putin more ruthless in his prosecution of the special military operation. And it's ruthless enough right now. I mean, he was taking a city a week. He's taking a city a day, or 2 or 3 cities a day now. And Ukraine is virtually folding under the juggernaut. All he's got to do is keep that up. And one wonders now if he's not going to be incentivized to keep it up a lot further than he originally intended, to include taking Odessa. I would say right now it's 50-50. He's probably going to take Odessa, and he's not going to give it back. Not any more than he's going to give the eastern provinces back, or give Crimea back, or anything like that. So we're looking at simply perpetuating the conflict in order to, in effect, give Putin more territory and more of Ukraine. Ukraine truly will be a rump state, if it's anything at all, after this is over. And Donald Trump, at the end of the 50 days, will manufacture some new sort of thing. And the 50-day mandate is meaningless. It's meaningless coming from Trump. That's what bothered me about the Iranian president this morning, his naivete, if that's the right word, And if his words were blessed by Ayatollah and therefore mean a fairly comprehensive acceptance of those words, that they're even willing to talk to the United States anymore. It's mind-boggling that they would be at this point, especially knowing that Netanyahu is still there. I just watched a videotape of Katz, the defense minister, and several other generals around him as they surveyed the humanitarian operation in Gaza. What were they surveying? This morning, the UN said 675 people were killed in the last couple of days around these humanitarian food dissemination points. That's what they are. They're killing grounds. And that's what every day, Haaretz says, well, 75 people died today at the food place. 100 died today. 35 died today. That's all they're doing is murdering people, continuing the murder of Palestinians while they're trying to get food and water. It's the most unconscionable thing you could possibly conceive of. And here's the Minister of Defense chortling in the video, laughing in the video with his generals as he watches this destruction take place. And we're party to that. We're party to that. We're blessing it. We're working with it. We're going to apparently now bless whatever it is Netanyahu wants to do to move these people somewhere else, wherever that somewhere else is, or to create a beautiful city in Gaza for them to live in, temporarily, of course, a concentration camp by any other name. And meanwhile, in the West Bank, it's getting worse and worse. In Syria, they just attacked again in order to defend the Druze. In Lebanon, they have said the ceasefire, it doesn't exist. They've told the Lebanese government they're not leaving. This is unconscionable, what we are blessing. But it is, as I said, it's a theater in World War III. It's just remains to be seen whether we're going to reopen the war with Iran and when we're going to do it. And are we going to do it on our own initiative, or are we going to let Netanyahu start it and act like we've just been drug into it? I predict that's what Trump will do because he's a chicken shit, basically.
There you mentioned the interview of the Iranian president Masud Pesk. He was criticized that the people, I don't know if how much the Iranian media, you read the Iranian media, you're aware of what's going on, but he was just, they smashed him after the interview.
I can imagine.
Because they thought that he humiliated the Iranian position. He humiliated the Iranian side because he wanted to. I don't know if, and I don't see any other government in Iran coming and being willing to talk with the United States other than this government. That
I when I was listening to it, I think I had the same feeling some Iranians might have had. And I was thinking to myself, are they setting him up? Is the Ayatollah and others on what we call the hardliners, are they setting him up? Or have they written his remarks so that they can get rid of him? I don't, because that's how crazy I thought his remarks were. Almost insane when you think about what's happened to Iran. Almost like he was cowed, and he was talking as a man who was cowed, a president who was cowed. And why would you be cowed by a Yamamoto type attack on you? That, I was reading some of the Iranian press, and they were talking about how these people had been assassinated. They were more or less on leave, as it were. They were taking a little time off because the situation had relaxed a bit. They were with their families. They were with their children, and they were assassinated. Typical Israeli actions, but that's not what makes a president get up and give a talk like that, give an interview like that. So I take the Iranian people at face value, what you're telling me about their feelings. I'd be that way too.
The people are not feeling that good. They're feeling horrible, I would say, about the interview. But we know, Larry, with the new polls coming out in Iran, I read before coming to this live, I talked with Marandi I had a talk with him today. And he said the new polls are coming out. And one of the polls is somehow a participation of one of the with one of the universities in the United States. I don't remember the name of university, but the new polls show how the support for the government in Iran has increased as an outcome of the conflict and the war between Iran and Israel. I was arguing this before. I said to Scott, said to Larry Johnson, and I don't remember if I talked about it with you. You cannot attack a country and you somehow feel that they're gonna overthrow the government because of your attack. It's unbelievable,
It's
Larry, what
bumbling.
has happened, how they
It's bumbling stupidity. I mean, it's just it goes right back to my own war, the one I know most about, to Vietnam, where we thought bombing Ho Chi Minh would make him submit. It just made him adamantine. It made him absolutely unrelenting. And it made his generals and his colonels and his soldiers in the field the same way. I know my tour in Vietnam was fighting Red Star wearing hardcore North Vietnamese Army regiments. They were absolutely committed to the conflict. In fact, Tet had taken out their most probable opponent should they be victorious in the South, the Viet Cong. Tet had pretty much eliminated the Tet Offensive, and our response to it had pretty much eliminated the Viet Cong. I could not find a Viet Cong to fight. I found hardcore khaki-clad NVA Red Star wearing Ho Chi Minh soldiers to fight. That's what the bombing did. That's what our counteroffensive against the Viet Cong did. You are not going to convince, you got it right. You're not going to convince any people to cease supporting their government by bombing the bejesus out of the people. No way.
Larry, it seems that Russians are somehow confused with Donald Trump. Here is who's not confused with. Here is what Lavrov said. You remember before Donald Trump coming to power, before being elected, he was talking about why do we need to put sanctions on Russia, on Iran? We need to find some sort of solution with them.
Yeah.
What's wrong with us? And here is what Lavrov mentioned the same thing. Here is what he said.
Heard specific threats from Washington coming against BRICS, saying that BRICS undermines the interests of the United States. Well, let me say this. Earlier, President Trump had a different opinion on that. He directly said that actions made by the Biden administration using the dollar as a weapon has undermined the authority and the respect for the dollar as a currency, irreversible damage. And I'm sure he understands how true that assessment was, and how BRICS and Latin American communities and other organizations have been trying to find ways to settle trade in other currencies to be insured against this actions coming from Washington. This is a process that's happening. Everyone understands that, including Trump, and this process cannot be stopped. It's not something that we wanted. We didn't want to run from the dollar, or other countries never wanted to do that. It was the Americans that tried to use the dollar to punish those who they deemed to be acting wrongly, not in accordance with their rules-based world order.
Yeah, when it comes to the bill of Lindsey Graham together with Blumenthal, they're talking about putting secondary tariffs on Russia. And for the case of Iran, I would assume that would be the case. But when it comes to secondary tariffs, how they're going to put secondary tariff on China? And because China is receiving its energy, its oil and gas from Russia and Iran, and it's an attack on China if you go in that direction,
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes. I watched that earlier, Sergey. In fact, that's the third time I've watched it. And it came to my mind the first time I watched it that when I walked into Powell's office when he was Secretary of State in late 2002, early 2003, he just met with Sergei. And I had not been able to attend the meeting, so he was going to give me a sort of back briefing on it. And one of the first sentences out of his mouth, because I inquired something, you know, like how'd it go or whatever, was a very powerful statement that I'll never forget. He said, well, Sergei has never been untruthful with me, or he has never told me an untruth. The only other ambassador that I had heard similar language from with regard to Powell was Joschka Fischer from Germany, who had developed a pretty close relationship with Powell. But that was quite a commendation coming from Powell. And I found nothing in their relationship later to contradict that. So whenever I hear Sergei talk, I think about that, and I pretty much subscribe to what he's saying and understand the motivations for his saying it, diplomatic and otherwise. All that to say that he's right. He's right, and it must perplex him, probably one of the most accomplished diplomats in the world today, along with Wang Yi from China. Quite a combination there, Sergei Lavrov and Wang Yi, whom I've also known for a long time. And they're faced with essentially what I described earlier, World War III starting, and an idiot orchestrating the other side. And you would think, reading your Clausewitz, that the prince on the other side being an idiot would be an advantage, but not in a nuclear weapon world. It's not an advantage. It's a distinct disadvantage, because you are very reluctant to use the full panoply of your power against that antagonist, even though you know he's incompetent. That's the circumstance that Putin and Sergei and Wang Yi and Xi Jinping are in now. Much the same way, in a different texture, if you will, that the Germans were at the start of World War I. Here they are triumphant. They put the Germanic tribes together, credit Bismarck. Everything's looking really good. Their population is soaring, surpassing Britain's and France's. Their economy is dwarfing them. And all of a sudden, it's looking like war. Well, they didn't have the problem with total idiots in London and Paris, although they would probably argue that that was the case. And John Maynard Keynes sort of makes a little bit of that argument too, particularly with Churchill later, whom we just extol, you know, and he wrote his own history like Henry Kissinger. He wrote his own history. So we're still trying to disabuse ourselves of some of that. But these were warmongers. They were warmongers, but they were smart warmongers for the most part. Trump is an idiot. Trump is a certified idiot. And around him are certified idiots, from Kristi Noem to Marco Rubio, although I would give Rubio a little bit of credit that I wouldn't give to some of the others. So what does that mean to Lavrov and Putin? It means danger, significant danger. So they've got to be careful, even though they're going to pursue this war with Ukraine to the last dead Ukrainian, I think. They've got to be very careful, because they're up against a person whose mercurial, stupid, idiotic, monstrous character could explode at any moment. And when the explosion could be nuclear, they have to be doubly concerned. So I would not want to be in their shoes, to be that competent, to be that knowledgeable, that circumspect, that prudent, that wise on your side, and have absolute morons on the other side. And that's what we got. And it's not at all helped or attenuated by people like van der Leyen, what's her name? Ursula
von der Leyen.
Ursula von der Leyen, who's now engrossed in her own crisis with Pfizer, 35 billion euros crisis, and Rutte and Merz and Macron and Starmer. It's not aided and abetted by them, because they're idiots too. It's almost like an assemblage of idiots on the Western side, the imperial side. That confluence of characters and personalities and incompetence rarely exists in history. But when it does, it makes the other side opposing them have to ponder things very carefully. And in the nuclear age, really carefully. I mean, every time they must think about what do we do next, they have to think about they have 6,000 nuclear warheads.
Larry, is Donald Trump really in charge in Washington?
No. And that's what I mean. How would you feel if you were up against an empire that had 6,000 nuclear warheads and no one in charge? That's what they're dealing with. And they're exacerbating their problems to a certain extent by the special military operation, but they don't have any choice now. They started it, they pursued it, they've killed a lot of people, they've lost a lot of people themselves, though not nearly as many as Ukraine. Did you see the recent prisoner exchange? There were hardly any Ukrainian there. The Ukrainians didn't need to be there. There were no Ukrainians to exchange. It was mostly Russians. Or mostly Ukrainians. I got it backwards. Mostly Ukrainians, Russians. So it's, I don't know. It's down to the point where I even have to say I would not want to be Putin and Lavrov, nor Xi Jinping and Wang Yi, because they are confronted at a time of great peril in the world. They are confronted with an idiot in charge of the other half, if you will, though it's rapidly becoming much less than half. I keep pointing out to people, 2/3 or more of the world right now is in Asia. 2/3 of the world's money is in Asia. 2/3 of the world's thriving businesses are in Asia. Look at the United States. We couldn't even make enough Patriots to supply NATO and ourselves if we tried. We can't. We cannot. Once that becomes very, very visible to everyone in the world, and it is going to become visible, and also how poor our weapons at the top of the line, so to speak, perform against Russia's, and I suspect China's too, and maybe even Iran's, then their problem is going to not be easier, but even deeper, because then the reliance on nuclear weapons will be paramount, and they've got to deal with that.
When I look at Donald Trump, Larry, and the way that he's talking about the deals and how we're going to gain from this sort of by sending weapons to Europe, we are just selling them. We are getting a lot of money from wealthy European countries.
Yeah, wealthy. Yeah, wealthy. Wealthy like we're wealthy. Print some more money, Bill.
It reminds me somehow somebody in a sinking ship that he just cares about his pocket. He doesn't care about the ship that is just sinking and taking him down as well.
Now I think you put your finger on a very valuable insight into Trump, and that is that his real purpose in life is to make money for himself and his immediate family. And that's his real purpose of being in the presidency. So a lot of this is just cosmetics. But the cosmetics, as I've tried to point out, are very dangerous, because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's not even a good cosmetician.
Yeah. Larry, do you feel that Russian foreign ministry said today that they're going to try to reach to Ukrainians? They're trying to ask Ukrainians to participate in the third round of talks. It doesn't seem that Ukrainians are willing to do that. Do you feel that happening? Or Russia said, if not, we're going to decide about everything on the battlefield. We're going to go, we're going to reach our goals.
It's a reasonable initiative, and I applaud them for trying it. I think Zalinsky has to be gotten rid of before that sort of initiative might take. And it would be better if Zalinsky were taken care of by the Ukrainians, either non-lethally or lethally. And the Ukrainians seem to have a penchant for the latter. So I don't think there's any problem with the Ukrainians doing it either way. But they have to do that, and they have to present a different front to Moscow. And that front has to be one that says, we're ready to talk, and we're ready to talk about peace, and we're ready to talk principally on your terms. We'll want some things. We'll want some reassurances. We'll want this and that, and maybe we'll put out what we want a lot more aggressively than we actually accept at the end of the talks. I wouldn't tell the Russians that, of course, but that's what's got to happen if there's going to be a premature, as it were, stop to this conflict. It isn't going to be Trump. Trump is incompetent, utterly incompetent. In the economic consequences of the peace, John Maynard Keynes gives a description of Woodrow Wilson that is priceless. Against Lord George, against Clemenceau, against the other people at the talks, even with Colonel Edward House at his side, he was utterly incompetent. And he was. Brought his 14 points, and his 14 points sundered at his incompetent feet. Well, that's kind of the way Russia has to look at the other side in terms of negotiations now. But if they got rid of Zalinsky and put a decent team together, and that team was intent on stopping the conflict with as much of Ukraine as possible remaining, it could happen. And Trump would be nothing in that. Nothing. In fact, watch him, were it to happen, watch him scream and holler about it.
Larry, how do you see the United Kingdom in Ukraine, or do they have the upper hand? Do they still have the upper hand in Ukraine, MI6 and the intelligence service of the United Kingdom, or you see?
Yeah, to a certain extent they do. And it's not just there, Nima. It's also in the Baltic, which is really worrying me in terms of what they're trying to do to the Russians. And in that little enclave there that the Russians are trying to zealously guard, and lots of participation there from Ukrainians, including their intelligence service. I can't say more than that, but if we could somehow nullify the impacts of that triumvirate, those three intelligence services, which are working the entire arc of the crisis. They're working all the way from Southwest Asia, Iran and Syria, all the way up to the Baltic. And I'm suspecting, really worried about them working in the Arctic, because they are, and they're arms merchants. They're arms merchants. They sell weapons. They shift weapons around. They do it clandestinely and they do it openly. I would suspect that if any patriots make it into Ukraine, they'll be delivered by the CIA. I mean, that's how embedded in the arms sales world they are, and in the arms transfer world, especially when it's supposed to be clandestine. So yeah, they're still there, and they're still mucking things up. I don't think Trump knows how to rein them in. I know Tulsi Gabbard doesn't. Tulsi Gabbard hadn't got a clue as to how to rein them in. They extend the middle finger to her, probably in prayer every morning. And the CIA director, you know, when Scott Ritter and all these other guys, Colonel McGregor, they all got it right. He's working for Israel. The CIA director is working for Israel. He might as well hang his hat in Jerusalem.
Larry, a country that, when we were talking about the situation in Caucasus, in the southern part of Russia, we never talk about Azerbaijan. Something
the Iranians,
yeah,
the Iranians do.
Yeah, Iranians do. Yeah, they know Azerbaijan, but what has happened to Azerbaijan? What's going on in Azerbaijan? You've mentioned from Ukraine to Syria. We know that it's in the middle, Azerbaijan. Yeah.
I think it's the same thing that's happening with different models and different shapes and forms in Georgia, Romania, and other places in the Caucasus in particular, where we are trying to generate another front for Putin. And one of the things we stumbled on was this kind of developing situation between Armenia, Azerbaijan, to a certain extent, the Taliban in Afghanistan, and other elements in there that have always had some sort of antipathy toward or animosity with Iran, or coveting their territory here, there, and everywhere. I think a lot of the people who were involved in Israel's great success in its initial attack on Iran were Afghans, Azeris, and possibly others in that very fractious border region there that Iran has. That's a long way. That's a big border. It's almost impossible to police that thing all the time. So I think that's a great place for the CIA, MI6, Mossad to play, and Mossad is there, big time there, because of Syria, and make things harder for Iran. And their ultimate goal is still to bring Iran down, regime change. And what does that mean? Does it mean Pahlavi or someone? What does it mean? It means a toady government in Tehran. One that will bow and scrape, not just do like the Shah did from time to time, do what we wanted him to do and take our money and build a nuclear program and blah, blah, blah. They want a toady there. They want an absolute toady there. They want something like Jordan. That's what they want there. They want a toady. And they're not going to be satisfied. Netanyahu's not going to be satisfied until that's the case.
How do you feel about the meeting between Donald Trump and Netanyahu? Was that related to Epstein? Was that related to the situation of Netanyahu in Israel in the aftermath of the attack? And we know that he couldn't achieve what he wanted to achieve with the case of Iran.
I'm not privy to what the private meetings might have produced, but I certainly saw enough of the public, including the obsequious handover of the nomination for a Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump. Bibi's got him totally figured out. He knows exactly what you have to do to flatter that guy and get things out of him. That's how simple he is. A simpleton, period. But in private, I don't know what they did, and I don't know what Rubio or maybe some of the other more, I can't even say more capable, but some of the other cabinet officers, or maybe some of the people behind Trump, maybe they affected some kind of pressure on Netanyahu to try and prevent any further war with Iran, that the United States has to come in and bail their ass out. But I don't know. I just don't know, because the comments that have come out are really disquieting. The comments that have come out seem to be, one, go ahead and do what you need to do to finish off Gaza. Two, we're not even looking at the West Bank. That's part of Israel. Three, don't be too disruptive in Syria, but go ahead and do what you need to do, including taking out any possibility that those guys in Damascus could fight somebody at any given time or protect their country. And three, okay, we'll get rid of the regime in Iran, but we'll do it on our own time, own dime and our own time. And we'll use other people in the region, but it won't be you. I don't know. Maybe those things were talked about. That Netanyahu would go along with any of them, I don't see. I just simply don't see. Even if there were agreements forged and Trump, made him sort of put his thumbprint on the agreement, Netanyahu will defy it the next day.
Do you feel that Netanyahu can survive what's going on in Israel in terms of a lot of people are coming out against him, Larry. Yes. It's not just about.
Well, the truth is getting out. People were talking and saying, do you know that Myrtle was killed? Do you know that house was blown up? Do you know that the coordinated intelligence group was absolutely destroyed? Do you know that missile that hit? And do you know that a lot of things got through the old Iron Dome? The word gets around, even though Netanyahu is probably the most capable propagandist in the region, if not the world. And he also has this clamp down and Knesset approval of the clamp down, even court approval of the clamp down on all manner of information exchange on national security grounds, of course. So it's very difficult for anybody to know in Israel what's going on from street to street, block to block, township to township. But the word is getting around, I've heard. And so there are a lot of people who are already disquiet over the hostage business. There are people now who I think, are finally convinced that Netanyahu is doing all of this for his own personal political purposes, to stay out of jail, in other words, and to burnish his reputation. And three, I think there are some Israelis who haven't left. I'm told that a lot more have left, got in those craft up there on the Mediterranean and sailed out. I'm told, again, I don't have any way to verify these figures, but I'm told that it's well over 1 million now who've left, and many are saying they aren't coming back. And you have the same phenomenon inside Israel. Many are saying they're not going back to dangerous areas because they don't feel like Israel has done enough to make sure their homes are protected. So they're tightened up in the center, if you will. All of this is real pressure on him, I think, significant pressure. But he still has his hands on the governing coalition and essentially on the Knesset. So I don't, I thought there for a moment, because of the success of the 12-day beautiful war now being filtered out as not quite the success that they prophesied it would be or said it was. I'm told that that's even changed now his attitude about holding elections. So that would say, no, things politically speaking are not quite as good for Netanyahu as he seemed to think they were on the eve of the beautiful war, the 12-day war. But I don't know. I've been saying all along, I thought his hold on power was tenuous, but as long as these people continue to be the Luddites and the idiots and the genocidal morons they are proving to be, who's to say? Because he's the leading person in that regard, the leading murderer, the leading liar, the leading person of deceit. He's all of those things. And, just this lawsuit or this action we've started against the ICC, we're completely complicit. We are utterly complicit. Nima, do you know who delivered the message in the UN? Yeah, this is going to make me sound anti-Semitic, but I don't mean it to be anti-Semitic. Why would you pick a guy by the name of Rubinstein to deliver this incredibly stupid message in the UN? That you are going to prosecute to the hilt of your law, which means military law, the International Criminal Court, if they do anything to pursue the warrants against Netanyahu and who's the other guy, Gallant, I think, and others that are in the West or that support Israel. Rubinstein delivered this go listen to it, it's on YouTube, this very acerbic declaration to the United Nations. Rubinstein. I'd have had someone named Jones do it. But I mean, we're not even hiding that. We're not even hiding that. Who runs America, people? The world. Ask the world. 8 billion people. Who runs America? Israel runs America. Of course, that's not true. We use Israel. But that's the image we want to impart, that Israel runs us. Because that makes us guilty, Nima. That makes us the ultimate guilty party because we're using Israel to do this, like they were a Doberman pinscher.
Larry, Israel is talking about the humanitarian city, a humanitarian city in the southern part of Gaza.
They don't know what humanitarian means.
No. And do you feel that in their sort of view, is that possible, or they're just mentioning it just to make it normal to talk about?
They use terms like that to do just that, to obscure their real intent. And just like this, I still cannot believe when I pick up a copy of Haaretz or I look at it on my phone or on my computer and I see that at a humanitarian dispensation point, another 100 Palestinians were killed today. How many does it take before people realize? I think Les Médecins Sans Frontières, I think the UN and other agencies that are still somewhat in the area realize this, that this is their technique now. Invite starving, thirsty people to food and water and then kill them. That's what they're doing. That's humanitarian. That's their definition of humanitarian. Dispatch these people, then they won't be hungry. Dispatch them, then they won't be thirsty. Kill them, then they won't have any worries.
I can imagine that Donald Trump would assume that would be possible. It could be some idea from Netanyahu when he has his administration. But do you think it's so stupid if you think that you're capable of doing this? Because look at Yemen, look at Iran, look at even Lebanon. The case of Syria is getting worse as time goes by.
Yes.
Nothing is under control.
That's the theory of World War III. That's the theory of the empire stopping its deterioration in its tracks. And what it is doing is deepening and accelerating that deterioration. But that's the history of empire, all the way back 5,000 years. That's what empires do at the end. They kill themselves.
Larry, I believe that the Israeli attack and then the American attack on Iran was the last shot in the head of those people who believe that they can find a path, some sort of solution with the West. They're just getting closer to Russia and China. From what I'm witnessing in Iran, people are somehow so much unhappy about the way that the United States was talking with Iranian officials on their back. They were coordinating with Israelis to attack Iran. It's not something in the mind of Iranians. These pictures, they're not gonna fade away from their mind. They're gonna stay there. That's why I think that would influence the foreign policy of Iran in a long run. Do you feel that Iran is heading toward receiving more weapons, more defense systems from Russia and China? And how is that going to change the policy in Washington?
To the latter question first, I'm not sure the Iranian calculation is that they need much more. I think they have sufficient to devastate Israel or the war of the cities, as it were, to resume and the missile exchange resume. Plus, we've run out. We don't have any more Patriots, THAADs, and other things. Very, very short supply of them. And Lockheed can't make them that rapidly. So that's part of it. Another part of it is, though, and your comment, your question suggested this, you know, I've always been told by Iranians and others who were expert in Iranian affairs, and I believe what I was told was truthful, that the Iranian people really did not hate the American people. They admired the American people. They admired our system. They admired what we'd done in the world and such. They only hated our government and the policies of that government. I think that's shifting. I think they are beginning to understand as a people, as a unified people, which this bombing did. I think they're beginning to understand that their feelings towards the American people were perhaps misplaced, that the American people are indeed responsible for some of this, if not a lot of it. That means a whole different relationship, in my view. That means there is no sympathy, no empathy in Iran, 90 million people, for the great Satan. That means they really do think we are a great Satan, not just the government and not just propaganda, but they actually think that. I hope that's not true, but if it is, then it's a different situation, I think, in terms of ever coming to some modus vivendi with Iran. And that's one reason why I thought the president's remarks to Tucker Carlson were really ill-formed and ill-shaped. Yeah.
It seems that I don't know who's giving advices to the president of Iran, but it seems somehow he felt that he needs to, I don't know, to talk this way, because the main goal, if I want to summarize what he said, the main goal was that the problem between Iran and the United States is Bibi Netanyahu. He's doing everything to sabotage the talks between Iran and the United States. But how can you say that, and considering Donald Trump said that he knew about the attack, he knew about
Yeah.
He knew
And,
about everything before the attack happening on Iran.
and it's obvious that the president doesn't understand that Israel's our tool. We're not Israel's tool. I keep insisting on that. I think Lindsey Graham tells the truth when he stands there and he says, if they weren't doing it, we'd have to be doing it. And he loves the facts that they're doing it. And I don't know that the president of Iran understands that. And I don't know that he understands that regime change is the goal of the United States government by legislation.
How did the regime change benefit the United States? I don't know. I cannot find a single case that the regime change has helped the United States.
Nor can I. I keep insisting that on that fact with the people who argue with me that, you know, regime change is a sound policy. It's a stupid policy, an absolutely stupid policy. Show me one place, I say. Did it work in Vietnam? No. Did it work in Afghanistan? No. Has it worked in Iraq? No. Well, they'll say there is a different regime there, and I'll say, yeah, how do you like it? With regard to U.S. interests, how do you like it? Has it worked anywhere? Is it going to work in Syria? And was it really regime change, or was it us putting a bunch of terrorists in charge in Damascus? I don't know. The verdict's still out on that as far as I'm concerned. Israel doesn't seem to think, and remember what I said about Israel, our tool in the region, that what's happening in Damascus is conducive to its own interests. Otherwise, why would it have expended all that ordnance to destroy every possible capacity Syria had to defend itself?
You mentioned more than 1 million Israelis left Israel during the war between Iran and Israel. But how about when we look at Iran? They were talking about the people are moving from Tehran to other cities, but they're in Iran after all. If
Yeah.
that sort of rhetoric was right, and they have been honest about the way that they were expressing the situation in Iran. But after all, this is a little country, Israel, that if the people who were somehow Israel tried to attract these people into itself. And right now with the war, with what's going on in Israel, how they gonna continue attracting these people to be interested in staying in Israel? I don't see that happening to the future of Israel. I don't see, even in the United States, those people who are concerned about Israel, who support Israel, they're I don't know if you see the actor, the man, his name is, let me just check it out here. He said that he's so afraid of what's going on between Israel and between the public opinion and what's going on in the world, considering what the actions of Israel and the reality of the governance in Israel, which we know he's talking about Netanyahu.
Right.
He said that Netanyahu is doing something to Jews, not to Israelis, to Jews all over the world. That nobody would be able to fix it.
Absolutely. I think the greatest cause of anti-Semitism's new resurgence in the world is Bibi Netanyahu. Now, that's a stark anti-Semitism. I think anti-Israel is not the same as anti-Semitism. And anti-Israel is growing by leaps and bounds. It's growing amongst 40-year-olds and unders in the United States, and I think it's growing similarly in the West in general. There are people who won't come out and say anything blatant in that regard because they're afraid of being accused of being anti-Semitic. And as we know, there are laws now that are very damning in terms of public displays of anti-Semitism, and people who will declare that anything you say that's anti-Israel as anti-Semitism. So that's a dissuader. On the same token, though, that makes the phenomenon grow. I think I told you, a rabbi in New York City said to me that the greatest cause of anti-Semitism's growth in the United States and probably the world is Bibi Netanyahu. I think he's right. I think he's very right. It's not good for Israel. It's not good for Israel. If Israel is to remain in the Levant and to be a functioning state in the Levant, it cannot pursue the course it's pursuing right now and has pursued since October the 7th, and to a certain extent before that, particularly under Netanyahu, and expect to survive. It just can't. It will be forever at war, and eventually destroyed, especially if I'm right about the disappearance of the empire. That doesn't necessarily mean that the empire's vassals have to disappear. I mean, just go back and look at other empires. Look at how the Western Roman and the Eastern Roman maintained a vastly spread economic and trade network, even after their power had completely gone, because the fabric was there and the people were there and the people got along fairly well. Once the empire was completely gone, in most cases, Eastern and Western, with the Eastern Roman Empire staying around for a long time and becoming really the Byzantine Empire, then you had differences develop and you had fractious relationships that didn't exist when the empire was there. For example, Jews and Muslims got along pretty well during most of the times of the empires, whether it was the Persian or the Eastern and Western Roman. But it's difficult to compare history and put it in today because things are so accelerated. Things move so much faster today than they did then, partly because of technology and partly because we think faster because of that technology. It's not necessarily sound thought, but it's faster thought. Often that speed makes the thought bad, not good. But we're in trouble. We're in trouble in the West. And as I said before, I don't even think we know it, except the billionaires. The billionaires know it, because the billionaire's purpose in life is to survive and to ride the ship of empire until it is about ready to sink and then abandon it for the new aborting empire.
Larry, here is his name was Mandy Patinkin. Here is the way
Yeah, I've heard
he
of him.
had the New York Times.
Yeah.
Here is what he said. Let me play it for you.
Thinking or feeling any differently about what it means for you to be Jewish in this moment?
Yes, I am. I'll let them go first.
I hate the way some people are using anti-Semitism
Claim.
as a claim for anybody that is critical about a certain policy. You know, as far as I am concerned, compassion for every person in Gaza, you know, is very Jewish. And the fact that I abhor the policies of the leader of that country does not mean I'm a self-hating Jew or I'm anti-Semitic.
You mean Netanyahu when you say the leader of that country? Yeah.
Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes. I feel this is the behavior, the politics of what he's doing is the worst thing for Jewish people. It's like lighting a candle for anybody that has any anti-Semitic feelings. It's creating a generation of wounded and hurt kids who will understandably be very angry. So that is how I feel, and I feel, I really feel deeply troubled and horrified by what is happening in my name.
10, 15 years ago, I was in Philadelphia, and then I go up to the hotel room. Catherine was in the hotel room, and the movie was on. She was watching The Princess Bride. And just as I walked in the room is that final scene in the movie where Inigo is sitting by the window with the man in black. And the man in black asks Inigo, would he like to be the next Red Pirate Roberts? And the Inigo Montoya actor, who was me, said these words, which I did not really know what they meant, that William Goldman wrote, which I think are the singular greatest words I've ever read. You know, I have been in the revenge business so long. Now that it's over, I do not know what to do with the rest of my life. And I ask Jews all over the world to consider what this man, Benjamin Netanyahu, and his right-wing government is doing to the Jewish people all over the world. They are endangering not only the state of Israel, which I care deeply about and want to exist, but they are endangering the Jewish population all over the world. He is the most dangerous thing, not just since October 7th. It has been a deeply troubled situation.
And endangering the Jews by endangering
Yes.
those in Gaza.
And to watch what is happening for the Jewish people, to allow this to happen to children and civilians of all ages in Gaza, for whatever reason, is unconscionable and unthinkable. And I ask you Jews everywhere all over the world to spend some time alone and think, is this acceptable and sustainable? How could it be done to you and your ancestors, and you turn around and you do it to someone else?
I am absolutely stunned that the New York Times put its moniker over that. But I would elect them to be my leader any day. The woman, the two gentlemen, they speak the truth. They speak the truth. This is my rabbi in New York, whom I've been a friend of for a long time. And this is what he's saying.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always. We are not talking about anything happy, but after all, yeah, this is the situation. We have to deal with it. But
Thanks for finishing up with that video clip. That was inspiring.
yeah,
And amidst all this treachery, demagoguery, propaganda, murder, and slaughter, that was inspiring.
thank you so much.
Take care.
See you soon, Larry.
Yep. Take care.
Yeah.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, me too.
Bye-bye.